Merkel Media.
What does the goddamn line say, Tony?
Please do not use gendered language.
Then what? I'll be arrested, put in airport jail?
Look, you're going completely sideways, man.
It's a big club, and you ain't in it.
How dare you?
Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.
I'm Chris Hansen with Dave on NBC.
Jack Marius Tack-Theratrip.
Dave Jackson, Sacramento, he, him. Steven Seagal.
Sex offender guy.
I'm Keith Morris.
This is Mumbai Gaddafi.
I'm Rick James, bitch.
Sorting through the lies.
The hijacker's passport was found blocks from the World Trade Center crash site, if you can believe.
$0.3 trillion in transactions.
And uncovering the centuries-long plan for world domination.
Learning about Cuba. Having some
Chinese people.
Have you ever been to prison? Swangles in Fort Lauderdale?
I have since this is hardware department.
Nothing could be more fun than jumping off a cliff with two German bisexuals.
Oh, you English are so superior, aren't you?
Thank you, comrade.
And now, Macroaggressions.
That's what assholes call it.
With your host,
Buddy, I don't know who you are, but you're about to get chlamydia.
Charlie Robinson.
Hey, Whitey, where's your hat?
You want to drop the blame on Charlie and say it's all Charlie's fault.
He was a retard.
I get some goddamn diuretic.
Welcome to Macroaggressions. I'm your host, Charlie Robinson. If you're watching us on Rockfin, Odyssey, Band.video, Vigilante.tv, or you are listening wherever podcasts are served, thanks so much. Appreciate it. Share the show, rate the show, do all those things. We need all the help we can get if we're going to beat the algorithms. Hey, thanks to our sponsors. We could not do the show without you. Legal Shield has been in business for 50 years. They have an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau, and their services are available in Canada and the United States. It is the collective buying power of all of us directed towards law firms in your area so that you get access to a lawyer at a very reasonable price. How reasonable? Well, $1 a day. How's that work? It's pretty cheap. Okay. It's $30 a month. You'll have access to an attorney that can help you with a variety of things, legal documents, questions about your rights, signing contracts, medical directives, financial powers of attorney. If you get a ticket, you talk to them. If you have IRS related situations, talk to them. If you have anything legal, you're going to want to reach out to your attorney. You'll have an app on your phone that you can just contact them. If you ever get pulled over by the police, you have a 800 number you can call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Before you talk to anyone, you talk to your attorney. You lawyer up. You do not talk to the police. You do not talk to the authorities without an attorney. And you don't sign anything that your work sends over to you without running it by your attorney first. Now, a lot of these things have been prevented from us taking advantage of it just due to the fact that it's like, God, I don't want to, what am I going to do? Spend $800 to have an attorney go over this contract and they may or may not find anything wrong with it. Look, here's the deal. We've leveled the playing field. The web domain is, I think, appropriate, www.don'tgetpushedAround.com. I don't like the idea of businesses or corporations or your work or institutions pushing you around because they know you don't have legal representation. Those days are over. We've solved the problem. Legal Shield solved the problem. They did so 50 years ago. And look, if you are interested, I think it's worth checking out. They've got ID Shield. They have a small business plan. They have a lot of things going on. If you carry a gun, you have to have you have access to attorneys that can help you with paperwork that has to do with concealed carry and things like that. I'll just do this. Go to the website, take a look, see if it's right for you. If it is, pull the trigger. I don't think you'll regret it. I think this might be one of the smartest, most proactive things that we've got going for us. Look, they tell us that we have equal justice under the law, but I don't think anybody really believes that anymore. I think that we all recognize there's a two-tiered system laws in America and Canada. If you've got money, things happen different for you because you have better attorneys. So look, level the playing field. Don'tgetpushedaround.com is the website. Check it out. See if it's right for you. Also, 2023, it's a new year. It's a new you. I sound like a Weight Watchers commercial, I know. But look, there's a lot of times when people put this stuff off until the new year and then they have some revelation about, oh shit, maybe I should get myself healthy so I don't feel so bad. Yeah, well, look, it's the new part of the year. But I don't care if it's the last day of the year. This is what you need to do. You need to get yourself healthy. You need to feel better. You need to take responsibility for this stuff. Nobody's coming to save you on this. It's going to have to be you, and it's going to have to be a decision that you make to get yourself healthy. Can't force you to get in the gym and do those things. But look, there's a company out there, Chemical Free Body. They make fantastic products. They have supplements that actually work. I suggest that you take a look at them, go over there and see if it's right for you. If it is, use the promo code MACRO, save yourself a little bit of money on your way out the door. They have free shipping. They have a double your money back guarantee if you don't like the products. If you need health coaching, Tim James is available for that. They've got what you need over there. So take a look. Detox in a Box is what I went through. That program, that 90-day program, which is a couple bottles of Green 85, gut detox, toxin detox, ultra enzymes, and probiotics. You take those, they're all just capsules. Take those capsules, mix up the drink it in the morning. You're good. You're good to go. So look, take a look, see if you want to get yourself feeling better. The product works. I know that. That's a good step. So you could do a lot worse than finding a company that actually makes products that work in the vitamin industry. It's very scammy. We know. Chemical Free Body is not that. So thank you to Tim and the crew over there. Well, you know how those globalist scumbags always live to be 100 years old? And you just go, how? You just know they're drinking. You just know it. Adrenochrome on tap at their summer cottage. Well, one of the worst people on the planet. And I say that knowing that I haven't met everybody on the planet, but I'm still willing to put my horse in this race that Henry Kissinger, in my opinion, has got to be, if not the worst person living on the planet today, he's got to be in consideration. He's in the final round for sure. The Super Bowl of scumbags. Henry Kissinger is playing some team out there. I don't know. But on May 27th, old Heinz Kissinger will be 100 years old. So what are you doing to celebrate the centennial of Henry Kissinger being born into this world, a world that he is actively trying to destroy? Are we going to hold a party for him? I mean, if it were up to me, he'd be blowing out candles in a prison cell, awaiting being taken out the back door, tied to a pole and But that's not just me. He's a wanted man in multiple countries for crimes against humanity because though he was a refugee fleeing Germany in the late 1930s to get away from the big bad Germans, he went on to have a career that I would say would make Hitler proud. Real scumbag of extraordinary proportions is Henry Kissinger. And we're going to talk a little bit about him, about who he is, what he's done, the trail of carnage and death and destruction and that this son of a bitch gave to Southeast Asia and other parts of the world due to the insane foreign policy dictates that Kissinger put forth while Secretary of State and National Security Advisor under both Nixon and Ford, and then his continued role after he was out of official politics, shilling for the Rockefeller Foundation, the United Nations, and every other institution that is actively seeking to depopulate this country. So, who is old Heinz Kissinger? Well, do you remember when I put this in my first book when George Steinbrenner, if you're a baseball fan, he was the Yankees owner before he died, and he was a notorious scumbag. You probably know him best by being his fake character on Seinfeld, where George Costanza worked for the Yankees and George Steinbrenner was his boss, and they never actually showed him. They just kind of showed the back of the head of the guy. But George Steinbrenner once called Hideki Irabu, this Japanese pitcher, a fat toad. And that always stuck with me. It was a really funny insult. But if I were to ever describe anybody as being it would be Henry Kissinger. He looks personified. Now he's 100 years old. He's as wide as he is tall. He is, you got to pull up that video, that picture of him going to the Met Gala ball with his wife, and the caption is, "Oh, it looks like all of Gotham's villains are out tonight," and it's like he's super short and his wife is super tall and looks like Cruella de Vil. It's really funny and kind of appropriate because he would most definitely be already tormenting the rest of the world. Why not a fictional city? So let's get into who this guy is. Okay, he has a MA and a PhD from Harvard. He grew up in Manhattan. You know, he's a German. He left Germany, like I said, in 38. Unlike Soros, who stayed behind to sort out the Jews, fellow Jews, I should say. At least Henry Kissinger had the decency to not stay and collaborate with the enemy. He went on to become a different version of the enemy. But he left and grew up in Manhattan as I think, 14, 15-year-old kid. They moved there. While still at Harvard, he became a consultant to the director of the Psychological Strategy Board. There's a lot of psychological strategy going on in Henry Kissinger's life. And I will say this for him, okay? I have nothing but contempt and disgust for this man. I think he is quite literally one of the worst people of the 20th century. A villain of epic proportions, and we'll get into the details of his crimes. But he is a smart guy. Okay, I'm not going to come out and say that he's not strategic and that he's not thoughtful. It's just the problem is that he's so easily willing to trade human life for agendas, and he does so without a thought to the costs of that. I think in part because there's a large segment of Henry Kissinger that's no longer human. Though he is lizard person adjacent, to be clear. I don't think he's an actual lizard person. I just believe that he has taken on, or has always maybe had, that sort of worldview, which is these people are dumb, stupid animals to be done with whatever we choose. We will create the world order, the new world order. We will run it. It will be our making. And the rest of the people would just have to get on board with it. And if they have to be eliminated, and he makes these calculations very easily. And that's disturbing. It's one thing if it's you and your friends and you guys are getting high and eating pizza and you're talking about who lives and who dies in this new world order that you've created in your head, or maybe on a Dungeons and Dragons board somewhere. But it's quite another thing when you're Henry Kissinger and you make the decisions on whether you drop napalm on a village or not. Okay, so I think it's important. So this is from Wikipedia. This is Kissinger's approach to diplomacy took it for granted that as long as the decision makers in the major states, meaning countries, not states, were willing to accept the international order, then it is legitimate, with questions of public opinion and morality dismissed as irrelevant. So he does it. He's an ends justifies the means type of guy. As long as they're willing to accept the international order, the new world order, then he doesn't worry about the morality behind that. He doesn't worry about what the public wants. He doesn't worry about public opinion. He doesn't care about the public because he's public. So, of course, why would you care what the public thinks if part of your plan is to remove a large segment of the public from this planet? You clearly would never take their opinions into your decision-making process. And Henry Kissinger does not. In fact, he is on the record saying the illegal we do immediately, the unconstitutional takes a little longer. Right? So that's Henry Kissinger. So let's dig in a little bit to his background, because most of his work happened in these years before a lot of us were even born. And certainly before a lot of us were paying attention as Henry Kissinger, because he is a fat toad and you see him and you go, whoa, that guy looks like a super villain, and then you see him praising Hillary Clinton and Hillary Clinton kissing his disgusting ass and all this stuff. And you go, who's Henry Kissinger? Like, he's clearly on team globalism, but is he dangerous still? I would say that Henry Kissinger is a rattlesnake. You know what I mean? He is extremely dangerous. And you should never turn your back on a guy like that. I don't give a shit if he's about to celebrate his 100th birthday in a couple of months. I don't care. This is a dangerous guy. So in 1951 through 1971, he was faculty at Harvard as director of Harvard International Seminar. Okay. This wasn't his only job. This was one of many jobs that he had. And Henry Kissinger is a busy beaver. He is involved in all sorts of things. I'm going to get to, towards the end of this, I'll get to discussing the number of NGOs that he's involved in. And I think he's set the record for that. So he's busy and he's watching what's going on and he's making things happen. And he's always around institutions that are incubators for power. Harvard is one of them. He's deeply involved in CFR, United Nations, obviously Washington, D.C., his role. He was the White House. He's wherever there's power, there's Henry Kissinger. Okay. 1955, he was a consultant for the National Security Council's Operations Coordinating Board. Also from 1955 to 1956, he was the study director on nuclear weapons and foreign policy at the Council on Foreign Relations, where he proposed using tactical nukes on a regular basis because they're tactical, meaning we're not going to drop Fat Man and Little Boy on Nagasaki and Hiroshima just willy-nilly. We're going to make sure that they're at the tip of an ICBM missile that is extremely precise in its targeting so that it hits and, it destroys a portion of a city, not the entire city, something like that. Because that's reasonable. And that's Henry Kissinger. He's not a savage. He doesn't want to just, haphazardly destroy cities. He only wants to destroy a portion of the cities where his enemies live, right? From 1956 to 1958, he became the director of Special Studies Project for the Rockefeller Brothers Fund. This will play a role in his future, I assure you. His connections to the Rockefellers are well known. He might as well be Henry Rockefeller, as far as the world is concerned, because if it were a Venn diagram of Henry Kissinger's interest and the Rockefeller interest, they would interlock almost completely, like a total eclipse. From 1958 to 1971, he was still, he never really left Harvard. Like I said, he was there he was the director of Harvard International Seminar, but he was also the director of Harvard Defense Studies Program, and he started the Center for International Affairs. Center for International Affairs. I mean, you could have gone with the acronym CIA, but instead they decided to put the F in there. So CFIA. I guess they didn't want to get sued by the CIA. I don't know. But this is a group that pushes to end national sovereignty and independence. So, he's all these nations out here, they're just getting in the way. We've got to come up with an arrangement where the nation state disappears and it's just run by a supranational or organizational body, like the United Nations. I wonder where he got that idea for. Maybe from working at the Rockefeller Brothers Fund or working at Harvard. Let's be honest. They're all kind of the same here. Zbigniew Brzezinski was a member of this too, but that shouldn't be a surprise to anybody because Zbigniew Brzezinski and David Rockefeller went on to start the Trilateral Commission, which of course Henry Kissinger was a proud member of. And the Trilateral Commission, what do they want to do? They want to get rid of national borders and also have to do with international banking. But one of the key tenets of the Trilateral Commission is these borders, these pesky borders. They screw up everything for trades and tariffs and taxes and all that stuff. If we're going to have globalization, we got to get rid of these stupid borders and just make everything the EU instead, so that borders are sort of written in pencil and we can decide to erase them whenever we choose to. So when Kissinger started this group, not the CIA, but the CFIA, Center for International Affairs, he did so with a partner. His partner was a guy named Robert Bowie. And Robert Bowie was deep state to his core and, a little bit older than Kissinger, probably showed him the ropes to an extent. He worked at the State Department. He was a member of the Council on Foreign Relations and the Trilateral Commission. And he was the CIA Chief National Intelligence Officer. Okay. So Kissinger starts a program at Harvard, right? His partner as if Kissinger isn't deep state enough, but his partner on the program at Harvard was CFR, Trilateral, State Department, CIA. So don't tell me that Harvard isn't deep state. All these guys come out of there, tech bros, Bill Gates, Zuckerberg, they all stink like intelligence. Facebook's funded by In-Q-Tel, the venture capital arm of the CIA. The CIA clearly has a role at Harvard. I think all the connections sort of make themselves at this point. Kissinger worked for Operations Research Office, which was started by the Army, but run by, wait for it, Johns Hopkins University, and they focused on management science. What kind of management are you working on? The management of the human race. I'm sure Heinz would say it just like that with his fat-toed voice. That's what they're doing. They're working on managing you. The Army first started this program. The Operations Research Office, run by Johns Hopkins. Kissinger and disarmament agency that was focused on arm nukes from Russia and China. It's really weird though. He's trying to disarm, he's working for this arms control and disarmament agency because if there's one thing we know about Henry Kissinger is that he definitely wants to disarm people as he's dropping World War II combined times two. Yeah. Kissinger is very concerned with disarming people. But it's funny that he wants to disarm Russia and China from getting nukes, and yet he is the CFR where he tactile nukes on a regular basis. So which is it, Henry? Are you against nuclear weapons or are you for them? Because here you're in a group trying to disarm. Oh, I get it. You just want to disarm Russia and China from having nukes. You still want to have them. You want Israel to have them. You want all your allies to have them, but just not Russia and China. I get it. But he also worked for RAND Corporation, which is a global policy think tank. Of course. You can't run the RAND Corporation and not have Henry Kissinger there. He's meant for that place. Look, Kissinger played an enormous role in American foreign policy from the late 60s to the late 70s. That's a long time. That's a decade. That's a decade in which quite a few things happened. Vietnam, issues with Cuba, He Operation Condor in South America. There were some African revolutions that were happening. Kissinger was involved in a lot of this stuff. Some would even say he made it happen. I wouldn't say that because I wouldn't want to get sued, but some people might say that Kissinger made a lot of this stuff happen. And those people wouldn't be wrong. Okay. So he's involved in the 60s and all the 70s. That includes Vietnam, that's the Soviet Union, that's opening up China, that's what was going on in Chile with Pinochet, Allende getting murdered and Pinochet being installed by the CIA. That has to do with Argentina, the dirty war there, the disappearances that were happening in these countries. This is all Kissinger. This has his fingerprints all over it. He was the National Security Advisor or the Secretary of State. I mean, he was both, but he was the National Security Advisor and or Secretary of State at some point during Nixon's administration and the Ford administration, which didn't last too long. He left when Carter came in. He rotated back in when Reagan came in, not in a real official capacity, but he was like I said, he was always hovering around the White House. He opened up China with Nixon. He's credited for opening up. What does opening up China mean? Well, America had really bad relations with China for a long time, for about 25 years or so. And China didn't want to deal with us. And Nixon and Kissinger prioritized forming a relationship with China, and they opened it up. They opened it up for America to start to work with China. Well, really what they opened it up for was for their bosses to start dealing with China, which are the Rockefellers, who immediately came in with Chase Bank and family. George H.W. Bush, he was working as the American ambassador to the United Nations at the time. George H.W. Bush, American ambassador to the United Nations. I mean, that's pretty deep state right there, right? And the Bush family was deeply involved in financing the manufacturing that was happening in China. The accounts I heard was that when this arrangement happened, the Bush family financed the construction of 5,000 different factories in China. So I think the Bushes have way more money than people think they have. And they have a lot. And because their connections through Prescott Bush to Brown Brothers Harriman, a bank that was deeply involved in financing the Nazis, I think that there's a lot of money sloshing around in offshore bank accounts that the Bushes control, specifically due to their relationship and their being right behind these guys as they opened up China in the early 70s. So, but think of it this way. Henry Kissinger is deeply involved in opening up China with Richard Nixon. He just spent 3 years from 56, 57, and 58 as the director of special studies project for the Rockefeller Brothers funds. And then the Rockefellers were the first ones in the door at China. My assumption, and it's an assumption, my assumption is that during those 3 years, he was working on the plans for what they were going to do in China. Maybe not every minute of every day for those 3 years, but you have to believe that at least part of his role was to figure out how to make that happen with China, because it's such a massive market, obviously, and it also represented a first mover advantage for these groups to get in there and be first. The Rockefellers being first with their banking, with their manufacturing, with whatever. So it would make sense that the guy that's working for the Rockefeller Brothers Fund for a couple of years, who then winds up opening the door for China and watching David Rockefeller walk through it first, it makes sense that they're partnered up together. And look, I mean, he also worked with the United Nations. He worked with the United Nations. So this is how it gets done. This is, and let's also not forget that part of his job was just to deal with China as the Secretary of State and as National Security Advisor, which he was both under Nixon and Ford. So his job was to maintain these relationships, but his night job, his side hustle, was working for the Rockefellers. That relationship never went away. You can take a job working for the White House, and you can keep your job teaching at Harvard and doing all these things. These are all fine. You can sit on the board of directors of all of these companies, and he does. You can be a member of over 100 NGOs, and he is. But your primary allegiance is to the Rockefellers if you're Henry Kissinger. And that was proved through his international policies, the decisions that he made. You always have in the back of your mind, what do the Rockefellers want? Well, they want access. They want globalism. They want free trade. They want no tariffs. They want access to all these countries. They want their resources. They want cheap labor, and they don't want anybody to figure it out. Henry Kissinger is your guy for that. So, look, man, I mean, the relationship between Richard Nixon and Chairman Mao happened as a direct result of Henry Kissinger. He made that happen. He forced that to happen. And this actually made it actually, at the time, you have to understand, this is the early 70s. At the time, as the Soviet Union was becoming this threat, the United States had never partnered with China. And now all of a sudden, here comes the United States and China doing deals together. This made it USA and China versus Russia. So it created additional strain on the Soviet Union, which was not lost on Kissinger, I assure you. Part of their plan was to break up the Soviet Union in some form or fashion. And of course, that eventually happened. So let's talk about what Kissinger is really well known for. And that is for being a bloodthirsty maniac with regard to the Vietnam War. Kissinger didn't give a flying fuck about protecting South Vietnam. I think we all know that, okay? He said he did, and the press releases that went out said that he was involved in making sure that South Vietnam was protected from those bad guys, the enemies in North Vietnam, and he was that were getting financed by the Soviets, and there was this domino theory. And well, if the Soviets take over Vietnam, then the dominoes will start falling, and it will be Laos, Cambodia, Thailand, and they'll just keep moving west until they take over India and Pakistan and Bangladesh, and then the next thing you know, the Soviet Union's everywhere, right? That's the lie that we're told. The truth of the matter is there was no domino theory. That's Kissinger making that up. That's Kissinger projecting that onto us, or onto the Soviets. But that was never the plan. So what happens? Well, war is hell. Bad things happen. People come home in body bags. It's awful. That's to be expected. When you start a war for whatever reason, that's going to happen. But there are boundaries. There are rules to this. There's supposed to be. And Henry Kissinger broke the rules. He doesn't care about the rules. Henry Kissinger doesn't care about anybody or anything except accomplishing his goals. So when the war in Vietnam started taking a turn for the worse, meaning America was getting its ass kicked by a bunch of farmers in sandals, the military took a look and said, well, they're being resupplied by these routes that are sort of going out of Vietnam and into Cambodia and Laos and sort of coming back in. So they're sort of the supply chain route from North Vietnamese for the North to their troops is putting them in a position where they kind of leave Vietnam temporarily and move into these other countries and then kind of come back in, which meant for Kissinger, let's just bomb them wherever they are. Let's bomb them in those foreign countries. Let's bomb them in Cambodia and Laos. And the international world said, no, you don't get to do that. Those countries don't have anything to do with this war. And Kissinger's response is, well, they do now. So he bombed Cambodia and Laos like a savage. And then he lied about it. He lied about not doing it. This was called Operation Menu. Okay. Kissinger authorized that. He made the decision to drop napalm on villages. And napalm is a concoction that, according to the Anarchist Handbook, you can make with 1 part gasoline and 1 part frozen orange juice concentrate. Do not try this at home. But it is a pulpy, semi-solid form of liquid gasoline that sticks to things while it burns, like plants and trees, palm trees, if you want to get them out of the way because you can't see what's in the jungle underneath them, and also human beings. If you've seen the iconic image of the naked Vietnamese children running down the street and with explosions going off behind them, that's what napalm does. Napalm burns the skin. It's horrifying. And Henry Kissinger authorized that because he's a maniac. And he also authorized the dumping of tons and tons of Agent Orange. Agent Orange is like a powdered chemical that is a defoliant. You spray it on trees and the leaves fall off. The reason for Agent Orange in Vietnam was because it's a jungle, and it's very thick jungle, and it's hard to see what's going on underneath the jungle canopy because you've got multiple layers of trees. But if you could make the leaves fall off of all the trees, then that would be much better for our bombers. Then they could see where they're actually dropping their bombs. Not that they had smart bombs there. They were just really randomly dropping them willy-nilly anyway, but at least you'd have a better idea of where the bombs are supposed to go if there weren't all these leaves on the trees. So first, before the bombers flew over, the Agent Orange planes flew over, spraying these clouds of orange dust all over the trees and giving the people that it fell on birth defects, later multi-generational birth defects, sort of like depleted uranium. And it caused cancer for the people that it actually fell on, the people that suffered directly from it, including our troops, who came home with all sorts of illnesses due to this. So I'm going to put that squarely on Henry Kissinger. Now, it might have been a military decision, but at the end, he says so. It's disgusting, but it's war, and it's how these guys think. Kissinger tried. Then, speaking of Vietnam, he tried to ban Daniel Ellsberg's book, The Pentagon Papers, that painted the war in a bad light, because that's what you do when you're an authoritarian. You silence any dissenting voices that could blow the whistle on your criminality. But don't worry, everybody, because the Nobel Committee, the Nobel Prize Committee, saw fit to award Henry Kissinger the Nobel Peace Prize for starting and ending a war that killed, maimed, or displaced millions of human beings, just like Obama. 2 members of the Nobel Prize Committee quit in protest. Henry Kissinger received this award in 1973 for his efforts, for his fantastic efforts in stopping the war in 1973. Problem is, the war went on for another 2 years. Don't let the facts get in the way of a good narrative, right? The Nobel Committee is fine with war crimes as long as it's for the empire. So this is how this pretty much sums up how Henry Kissinger felt about the war in Vietnam. Quote, "You should tell the Cambodians that we will be friends with them. They are murderous thugs, but we won't let that stand in our way." Henry Kissinger ordered the dropping of 3.7 million tons of bombs, and a ton is 2,000 pounds. 2,000 pounds. 2,000 pounds of bombs in a ton, and he dropped 3.7 million tons of bombs on Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos. To put that in perspective, you take every bomb that was dropped in Western Europe by the Germans, by the Russians, by the British, by the Americans, by all of the war, everybody that was fighting in Western Europe, take all of the bombs that were dropped on them, then take all of the bombs that were dropped on Russia, China, Japan, the Philippines, all of the fighting in the Pacific Fleet, all of the bombs that were dropped in the Pacific Fleet, all of the bombs that were dropped in the African portion of the conflict of World War II, every bomb that was dropped in World War II, add them all up, multiply that number by 2. That's how many bombs Henry Kissinger authorized to be dropped on Southeast Asia. He is, without a doubt, one of the worst people to ever live on this planet. Henry Kissinger has no hesitation in murdering millions and millions of people. Let's move a little bit down south to Latin America and what Kissinger did in Latin America. He has a brand. I'll give him that. He certainly has a brand. Chilean socialist president Salvador Allende wins in 1970s, making the United States very nervous, right? And angry, to the point that Kissinger and Nixon authorized the CIA to encourage a military coup to prevent the inauguration of this president, because we care about fair democracies, right? As we're threatening to murder the president. The inauguration, the military coup to prevent the inauguration failed, and Allende did become the president of Chile as he was voted into office to be. But that only lasted a little while because eventually the CIA got him. They finally killed him in a coup that was led by the army commander-in-chief Augusto Pinochet, who took over as president. And this was fully supported by Henry Kissinger and Nixon. They had absolutely no problem with this. In fact, that was the guy they wanted all along. While Pinochet was in office, 30,000 people just up and disappeared. No trials, no nothing. Enemies of the state, now that the new guy has been installed. Argentina. Kissinger was deeply involved in the Argentina Dirty War, military junta dictatorship from 1974 through 1983. So this is about a decade long, 10 years of state terrorism under Operation Condor, which sent right-wing death squads to round up anybody that had a problem with the government. Kissinger, again, was totally fine with this. I mean, look back to his statements about the Cambodia. You tell the Cambodians, we will be friends with them. They are murderous thugs, but we won't let that stand in our way. Well, the same feeling towards those in Argentina and those in Chile still applies. There's no compassion here. You do what you need to do. Disappearances were common in Argentina in the Dirty War. 400 concentration camps existed. That was fine, totally fine with Henry Kissinger. He was well aware of them, knew that they existed, and they had the full support of the United States. So this notion that America is out spreading freedom and democracy, it's just a really shitty sales pitch. It's not true. I wish it were true. I'm an American. It sounds much better if my team is out there spreading freedom and democracy, because that's a better thing to do. I'm not saying that democracy is the solution, for God's sake, but it's much better than spreading napalm and Agent Orange on people, right? But we don't do freedom and democracy. That's all sales. That's the glossy marketing brochure, but it's not reality. And you will know that it is not reality when you hear Henry Kissinger speak about a variety of other topics, because you will understand his worldview. Quote, depopulation should be the highest priority of foreign policy towards the third world, because the U.S. economy will require large and increasing amounts of minerals abroad, especially from less developed countries. You've heard that quote before. When we talked about Kissinger's national security document number 200. We're going to get to that in a second because we already talked about that with population control. But let's stay in the lesser developed countries, as Kissinger likes to call them, and talk and continue to talk about the coups that Kissinger's regime has supported. They did not object to Indonesian President Suharto's idea of invading East Timor, which is an island, which is a part of Indonesia that broke apart. It's a Portuguese colony on Indonesian land. And in 1975, they decided to break away from Indonesia. East Timor wanted to be its own country. And Indonesia said, well, we can't have this. We want to get them back. And this group said, well, we don't want to be back. We're going independent. So Suharto met with Kissinger and said, what do you think about me? Actually, Kissinger came to Indonesia and met with Suharto and said, what do you think about us taking back East Timor? And Kissinger's response is, well, give me a couple days to get home first before you do it. Don't just do it today while I'm here with you. So Suharto said, okay, deal, and waited an extra day and then invaded East Timor and killed a quarter of the population over the next 6 years. That's who Henry Kissinger is, just so we're crystal clear, okay? He doesn't give a shit about human life. He loves depopulation. He's open about it. He's talked about this. Here's a quote from Christopher Hitchens, author of a book, The Trial of Henry Kissinger. Kissinger should have the door shut in his face by every decent person and should be shamed, ostracized, and excluded. No more dinners in his honor. No more respectful audiences for his absurdly overpriced public appearances. No more smirking photographs with hostesses and celebrities. No more soliciting of his worthless opinions by sycophantic editors and producers. Yeah, he's right. That's how Henry Kissinger should be treated. He should be treated like the bloodthirsty psychopath that he is. So let's get back to that 1974 National Security Memorandum 200. We covered that before. That's the memo that talks about depopulation in the LDCs, the lesser developed countries. Look, it's a classified document that wasn't supposed to get out. Okay. It was supposed to remain classified for a long time. Or by the time it was declassified, it wasn't going to matter because everyone involved in it was going to be dead, except that these people lived to be 100 years old. So Henry Kissinger is still alive. The NSM 200 is out. It's been out for a while. People can read his words. It's not theory. He's not speculating. He's telling you what his policy is towards these third world countries. He's telling you that it is one of depopulation. He's explaining how it will happen. He's explaining why it needs to happen. He's explaining in detail the methods they will use to make this happen. And he's not asking for your input on it. The countries that were targeted through this memo slated for depopulation are as follows. We mentioned it before. I'll mention it again. India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Indonesia, Thailand, Philippines, Turkey, Nigeria, Egypt, Ethiopia, Mexico, Colombia, and Brazil. He specifically mentioned these countries. He said that American business interests could suffer from political instability caused by too many people there, meaning that they could impact the supply chain by having too many people in this country, too many people that are without jobs or maybe without food or whatever. It's going to cause the potential for there to be instability in this country. And look, if we're building a Standard Oil processing facility here, we need to have a little bit of stability. We can't just build these infrastructure projects and, our multinational corporations can't just move in here and then 2 years from now, there's a civil war because that's going to screw up all of our stuff. So we need stability in this country. Oh, you want everyone to be happy? We never said that. We just want stability. So the best way for there to be stability is if we get rid of all of these people. That's what he wants. He wants people to be removed from these countries by death and starvation. He calls straight up for it, and sterilization, of course, to protect the interests of American corporations. I mean, you always knew these guys were thinking that. It's just rare that you actually get a glimpse of it in paper, in writing. But again, he didn't meant for this to be seen. This memorandum was not meant for you to read it. It's meant for the White House to read it. It's meant for USAID, the regime change op, to read it. It's meant for the United Nations to get involved and to have it. Not you and me. We were never supposed to see this. In this memorandum, it talks about infertility programs, talks about the role of USAID, United States Agency for International Development, USAID. What they do is they come in and destabilize governments that aren't doing what America wants to do, and then they regime change them. That's what they do, while using food as a weapon. They talked about the United Nations being involved. They talk about the World Health Organization, which is a subset of the United Nations, being involved. They talk about sterilization programs via NGOs to provide political cover. They say, well, you don't have to make these decisions. You, president of, Bangladesh, you don't have to make these decisions because it would look really bad on you. What we're going to do is we'll take that burden off of you. We'll have the NGOs make the decisions on the sterilization programs. And then that way you're off the hook and we'll put money in your pocket. You know, they talked about withholding food, using food as a weapon. I mean, it's sick. It's just, he's a maniac. They talked about paying people to get sterilized in this memo. They talked about a food for sterilization program. You get sterilized, we'll give you food. My mind doesn't allow me to go there, to this way of thinking. Food for sterilization program, housing for sterilization program, money for sterilization program. All three of these are discussed. USAID forced sterilization program in Peru. They did a forced sterilization program in Peru and got 300,000 women sterilized. This is USAID. That's some international development you've got there. So what sort of international development programs are you putting forth? Oh, we're making sure that all the women in this country can never have kids again, because that way there won't be a bunch of people here getting in the way of our lithium deposits that the Rockefellers want to control. Quote, the New World Order cannot happen without U.S. participation, as we are the single most significant component. Yes, there will be a New World Order, and it will force the United States to change its perceptions. Henry Kissinger. So, what else is he involved in when he's not dropping bombs, plotting the use of nuclear weapons, using food as a weapon, forcing people into sterilization programs, and murdering dissidents? Oh, he runs Kissinger Associates, an international geopolitical consulting firm, which is most definitely not a pay-for-influence racket. Wink, wink. He's connected to 112 different non-governmental organizations. 112 of them Henry Kissinger's involved with. These groups include the Committee of 300, which I would suggest is one of the most powerful and dangerous groups of human beings on the planet. Trilateral Commission, Bilderberg, Aspen Council, Bohemian Grove, World Economic Forum, United Nations, Council on Foreign Relations, and the Atlantic Council. He is not a member of the Mickey Mouse Club. I mean, goddamn, I'm just looking at this. He's a member of just about all the bad organizations. It's crazy. He's a member of the Project for a New American Century. You remember them, right? That's the group that did 9/11 in conjunction with their partners in Israel and Saudi Arabia, of course. Do you remember, for those of you that were old enough to really be paying attention after 9/11, but do you remember the 9/11 Commission? They put that group together and they eventually put out this book called the 9/11 Commission Report, which was more accurately renamed the 9/11 Omission Report because of how it failed to even mention Building 7 in it. But do you remember the 9/11 Commission that was put together by George W. Bush to get to the bottom of 9/11, right? After those 19 Arab hijackers definitely flew the planes off course. Do you remember who was first put in charge of that commission? It was Henry Kissinger. People went fucking ballistic when he was named. He didn't last 2 weeks in that position. There was so much public outrage about it, which is amazing these days. Everybody now has been so dumbed down and docile that they probably wouldn't notice and certainly wouldn't say anything these days, even if they did notice. But back after that, After 9/11, people went crazy. They said, get this fucking guy out of here. There is no way we're going to we're not going to let Henry Kissinger be in charge of getting to the bottom of 9/11. Are you out of your fucking mind? He is a member of the Project for a New American Century, the group that orchestrated this. And you're going to have him be in charge of this? I mean, look, the guys that they brought in didn't do much better. Let's be fair. But Henry Kissinger, it's like, we're going to bring in Mohammed Atta to be in charge of the 9/11 Commission inquiry. Mohammed Atta did not fly any planes, I assure you. He is, when he's not trying to be the head of the 9/11 Commission, he is on the board, Kissinger is on the board of directors of so many corporations, it's almost hard to keep track of them all. I'll just mention a couple of them. A couple main ones: Gulfstream Airlines, airplanes, Hollinger Media Group. They own a bunch of television news and things like that, newspapers, out of Chicago, I think. He's on the board of directors for mining companies, which would be a good, listen, I mean, if you're a mining company, I'm not trying to, the mining companies are like, we have to get access to these resources in these countries, and these countries don't want to do business with us, and we got to find a way to get in there. Who's the guy who has the pictures of the president of the country with a goat on Epstein's Island? Who's the guy that's got that? That's Henry Kissinger. So if you want to do business in these foreign countries and they're making it hard for you and you need somebody to kick the door open for you, Henry Kissinger would be your guy, which is why I'm not surprised that he's sitting on the board of directors of mining companies. Okay. He's also on the board of directors of Theranos. And we know how that went. We could ask Elizabeth Holmes, but she's doing time inside a federal penitentiary for the next 11 years. He's connected to the International Olympic Committee. Kissinger is, but, and he's been named the Chancellor of the College of William and Mary. As if that wasn't enough, he was also the chairman of North American Soccer League in 1978. I'm assuming, is that when they brought Pele to play for the New York team? I don't know. Because Heinz is a big soccer fan, which is appropriate because he looks like a soccer ball. I've known her for many years now, and I respect her intellect, and she ran the State Department in the most effective way that I've ever seen. That's Kissinger talking about Hillary Clinton. He's a big fan, don't you know? Henry Kissinger is on the record saying that he wants artificial intelligence to make the decision on using nuclear weapons because it takes the human element out of the decision-making process and it becomes just about who has the best technology. That's what Henry Kissinger has said about nuclear weapons and AI. He thinks they're a great combination because what it does is it removes that element, the human element out of it. You know, the human element that's standing there like with their finger hovering above the button going, do I push this button or not? If I push this button, millions, if not billions of people are going to die. Do I push this button? And what Heinz is saying is, get that guy out of here. We don't want that guy screwing up the plan for depopulation. Let AI make the decisions. What could possibly go wrong there, right? As for COVID, Kissinger thought that international problems required international solutions. I'm sure that comes as a surprise to nobody. So he thought that the World Health Organization would be the right choice. But of course he does. Of course he thinks that. World Health Organization is part of the United Nations. United Nations was started by David Rockefeller. David Rockefeller is Henry Kissinger's mentor. Very simple. Very simple why these guys think that. They don't have to have the conversation. David Rockefeller doesn't have to have the conversation with Henry Kissinger saying, hey, you know, you always have to support the World Health Organization when these events like COVID come around. That conversation is unnecessary. Henry Kissinger knows exactly what his role is. Promote world government apparatuses that like the United Nations and the World Economic Forum and these groups that are working diligently to bring in a one world government like the Trilateral Commission and Bilderberg and the Atlantic Council and the Aspen Institute and Bohemian Grove and CFR and the UN and the WF. They're all on the same page. They're very clear about what they want. They want a one world government for them that they run, and they want a lot less people on the planet because it's easier for them to control. It's very simple. There have been calls for Kissinger to be brought up on war crimes and crimes against humanity, conspiracy to commit murder, kidnapping, and torture. This was all brought. Christopher Hitchens has called for his arrest on all of these issues. He is not allowed in some countries because they have big problems with him. And look, these countries aren't being paranoid for having questions about Henry Kissinger's methods. They're right for doing that. Let's wrap it up with this, because I think when you hear these guys in their own words, it sort of sets the tone for who they are and what they think. And that's part of the reason why so many people have enjoyed my first book, The Octopus of Global Control. I appreciate you guys all for buying it and supporting it. The reason why people like the format is because there are over 700 quotes from 500 different people that had a front row seat or were involved in some of these really important decisions that have happened over the last 100 or so years. And when you hear them say things, when you hear it in their own words, you get a little peek inside their soul. You get a chance to see what they really think when they think nobody's listening. So what does Henry Kissinger say? Well, in one of the quotes, and I have plenty of them from him in the book, I'm not going to overwhelm you with them right now, but we'll wrap up with this last one. I think it pretty much sums up Henry Kissinger. He said, the world population needs to be decreased by 50%, to which my response was, that sounds like a great idea. Let's start by cutting you in half, Henry. If you like this episode, you can take the additional step right now of sharing it with your friends and family. You can follow me on Twitter @macroaggression. I'm on Instagram as well. Tony manages that account. So if you want to go yell at Tony, go to Instagram and do that. You can follow me through the website, theoctopusofglobalcontrol.com. Thanks, everybody. Talk to you again.